It's no secret that George Janko left the Impaulsive podcast, but what was interesting was seeing Mike go on Valuetainment and open up and give his perspective on why George Janko left the Impaulsive podcast and how his greater purpose of wanting to tell people about Jesus plays into the decision and hurts some of the dynamic of the show. Let's jump into this. This is from the Valuetainment conversation. Shout out to Valuetainment. They've been doing some cool stuff. They had Mike on. So he says he was shocked by the falling out between Logan Paul and George Janko. Let's see what he thinks.
I mentioned earlier in what George kind of stands for, that is so ingrained in his being. It is so innate and real and authentic in him that it is his life's purpose to push the work of the Lord, to push the ideas of conservatism and traditionality and family unit and monogamy, which is incredible. But I think that that's not to say that those values are not important to Logan or to me, but that's not necessarily what that show is about, if that makes sense. It's an entertainment podcast. We have guests on. I asked Rick Ross today before I came here. We had Rick Ross on the show. We were supposed to have Johnny Manziel on as well today. I asked Rick Ross if he was interested in being cryogenically frozen, which I would like to talk to you guys about as well.
Oh my gosh.
There's not, we're not asking him like, when did you decide that this person, when did your relationship with Jesus reach this point? That stuff's incredible.
Isn't that what would make the show more interesting? Is you have the one guy that wants to talk about family, faith, conservative values, God, which, by the way, all those things are surging in terms of the studies, in terms of what the data is showing right now. And you guys want to talk about being
cryogenically frozen,
which that's interesting. We would talk about that on this channel.
Yeah.
Right. So it seems like a pretty big miscalculation of the average person is interested in the things George wants to talk about. Now, maybe George would overdo it sometimes. Maybe George would go a little too long about some of these things. Maybe he would kind of, go into a monologue instead of a dialogue, right? Maybe that would happen sometimes. Okay, fair enough. But I think this is a miscalculation on their part, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. And it's so impactful. And the fact that George has devoted his life to doing that stuff is incredible. But it was slightly disjointed from the more jovial style of the show. And I think that and by the way, this is just one part of it. It's pretty complicated scenario, but I think that kind of I think it really messed with George even more because he knows that he should be doing that stuff, talking about that stuff, prioritizing that stuff. And the fact that this wasn't an environment that was conducive to those type of conversations, I think was an unattractive situation for him.
So let me ask this question: because for somebody that watches a show or consumes a show, you're kind of like, okay, do those guys there's an element, it fits. It's working out our podcast. There's some days I do 101, great, some like that. But there's our group that likes Home Team podcast, and it's just us talking about events, views, what's going on, current event, this, what about this? And we do business, politics, me, Vinny, Tom, and Adam and Tom. And, Tom will take up that entire space with notes, and he'll literally come and prepare hours.
Charts.
But, it's different. So for the audience watches it and say, each person played a role, okay?
That's right.
Maybe you were the point guard. Maybe Logan's the scorer. He's a 2, but he's the guy that's driving the eyeball. So if he's playing Michael, you're playing point, whatever, and he's playing third, and still, let's say team that's working out. Do you think the whole process could have been handled in a different way for it to either end or for it to continue? Because based on what you're saying, it's fair to say, look, this is what we're talking about. George has a certain set of values and principles that's so core to him. He's not going to change. We can't change him. He can't change us. Best bet is, here's what we're doing, right? We're going to go part ways. But do you think there's a different way you guys could have gone about wrapping up the relationship?
In hindsight, everything can be done differently. There could be a little tweak here. There could be a little tweak there. He had already started his own show, which, as you all know, has become extremely successful. And I mean, there were conversations that happened that were in my eyes, looking back, they could have been done a lot better. There were conversations that involved religion. There were conversations that involved, George's feelings and George's sentiment towards how he was being treated by guests that were on our show. that potentially could have been overlooked.
I'll
just say this
Shout
for
out
myself.
Bobby Lee. Pause it. Shout out Bobby Lee. Right, we covered that extensively. You guys, y'all did him filthy over that. That was disgusting.
Yuck.
That was really sad that no one stepped in and you guys virtually let him get essayed on camera in front of the world to see and then make him look like a lunatic for being a reasonable man stepping out. That was foul, man. That was really gross. And I don't know what George felt or thought, but I mean that would make anybody really look side eye his homies. To the way you guys did him there. So that wasn't like a Shaq situation where he just didn't have anything good to say and kind of had like a no. That was a violation in my opinion. But go on.
I really did from the bottom of my heart try the hardest that I possibly could to when I saw things start to go off the rails a little bit from both sides to try to steer it back on track. I mean you can simply just watch the episodes and you'll see me putting my hand up like, yo, don't, like this is going too far. Like he's pissed off. And by the way, he has a reason to be so. Like I did that the whole time and did the same thing behind the scenes.
Did Mike do that? I don't remember if Mike said anything with the Bobby Lee situation happened.
I think he would.
I think George, listen,
Partially.
I think George is owed an apology from Mike and from Logan about the Bobby Lee situation. I think even you guys making him call and apologize to that, or him wanting to call and apologize to that, like you protect your people, man. So I think he's owed an apology from my vantage point. Who am I though? I don't know anything. I haven't seen anything.
I can only speak for myself. I'm 39 years old. I've been through a lot of shit in my life, and I like to believe that the way that I handle relationships, the respect that I have for people, the empathy that I have for people, the care that I take in every single interaction that I have in this world, I feel fantastic about the way that I did in the situation. I ran into George the other day. I know you probably weren't going to say it because it was.
I'm not going to say it. You could say it. I'm not going to.
So I texted you about it. Obviously, it was the first time I'd seen him since everything had happened. I was on a plane down here and I was sitting in my seat and, texting and I look up and there he is.
What are the chances?
There he is.
Crazy.
Yeah. Getting on the plane.
On the way to Miami.
On the way to Miami.
Well, I mean, that's
It's not that crazy. I mean, you guys are all YouTubers and travel. It'd be like me bumping into George. You know what I mean? Like it's like
exactly.
we travel, we move around, we go do podcasts. It's not that crazy that you.
not coming to Miami this time.
But I tell you though, it's not. Listen,
Like,
there's a
though?
lot of people I've done business with for the last 20 years, and I've not ran into them at the airport. So it's pretty random for it
I
to happen.
knew it was going to happen.
Eventually, yeah.
It was serendipitous, and I knew it was going to happen. He was with Belle, who they just got engaged. I'm sure you know, and incredible. And honestly,
Super sweet girl. I mean, you can tell they're in love.
they're both incredible people. George is an incredible person. Those values I talked about before, those are not teachable values. Those are ingrained in his soul and his heart. He is a beautiful.
They're not teachable values?
They're not teachable values. Wait.
This is Hollywood speaking, if you ask me.
Wait, not teachable values.
You can't teach someone to like love your friends and respect your friends. You can't teach someone to.
I think these are like literally teachable values.
Is it literally the point of these values is for them to be taught to you?
I think the Bible is teaching. A core fundamental of the Christian community is teaching every week.
Therefore, go out and make disciples of all nations, commanding them to obey everything I have commanded you to do, right? I agree with Mike. I think George is a good guy. I think George is a good guy. I think to see him walk away from that unafraid and unapologetic, and to do it with the grace that he did it with, and to do it with the humility that he did it with, and to him genuinely trying to mitigate and not drag that situation the way he could have, I think says a lot about George's character.
So what do you think about being a Christian in a non-Christian space like that and possibly being canceled or being fired or being whatever? Yeah. I mean, we just had Frank Turicon who gave you the book, Correct, but not politically correct or something like that.
Yeah. I think it's a tough place to be in. I mean, as we've seen George do and navigate.
Yeah.
I think it's very difficult. I think it's very hard to be in a place where you get to be a follower of God and infuse enough of your worldview and not water it down. I think it's a very tough place to be in. But it's not impossible.
We all knew this was going to happen.
You know, and George did a good job, I think, of navigating that space. I think it was bumpy, right? I think it was bumpy at times, But I do think that he did a good job. But I think the kicker is this is where most people are at. Like most of you guys are probably working secular jobs around non-Christians on a daily, right? And so the difference between George is that he's in entertainment.
Yeah.
Right? Which is driven by the things that are going to get people to click in the most, which is usually going to be lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, and pride of life. That's what gets clicks. That's what gets eyeballs. That's what gets engagement. And so therein lies the tension. By the way, for all of us.
Yeah.
For all of us, right? Lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life. As a Christian, you can't really do lust of the eyes, right? Lust of the flesh. I mean, you know? And so a lot of Christian content will oftentimes be pride of life, right? The need to be right, the need to dunk on other people, the need to call out other people. That's, you know, and that stuff, in my opinion, and I just had a whole conversation with somebody about this, that's the stuff that grows faster in the Christian niches.
That's crazy.
Right? Is that. And so it's because you're appealing to people's like most, I don't know how else to say it, like animalistic desires.
Carnal desires, yeah.
Carnal desires. And the fact that George has been able to navigate that and like legitimately pivot and have a banging podcast and pull in interesting guests.
Millions of views.
His conversation with Andrew Tate, brilliant, right? Brilliant conversation. Him being willing to be challenged publicly, you know, Girls Gone Bible. Like they checked him publicly.
Yeah.
That was great. And he's vowed to never curse again.
Yeah.
You know? So I think it's great. And I think George tried to do the best. And I think ultimately God used that to set it up. I don't think that was George's heart, because what I don't want to say is George was using Logan as a stepping stone. I don't think that's it at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he really was like, this is my best friend.
Yeah.
But it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And God used that as a stepping stone to position him to where he is now, which, I mean, I haven't looked at views, but I would argue George's pod is bigger than Impaulsive now. Is that
I mean, let's give it a second. Let's check it out.
Is that fair? Just pull up the Social Blade statistics. How many views are they doing a month?
Last 30 days, 10 million.
10 million views. Whoa. that's double what we do here, and our channel is 10% the size. Between this channel and the Blessed God Studios channel, we do 5 million views a month.
That's crazy.
Okay, so now show George's.
Last 30 days, 51 million. 5x. That's 5x.
Hey, man. And has half the amount of subscribers.
And you know what's crazy? When George first started his podcast, Logan Paul took shots on Impaulsive of like, we're not some new podcast that barely gets any views and struggling for guests or whatever. Like he took a shot and like a month later, George is doing 5x Impaulsive numbers.
Hey, man. You know? That's just how it goes sometimes, bro. So shout out George Janko, you know? We see according to the Bible that prayer is extremely important in terms of us being transformed from the inside out when we get aligned with God's will. For the Christians watching this channel, I want you guys to implement these spiritual disciplines in your day-to-day life. And the only way I've been able to do this consistently is through writing down my prayers in a prayer journal that does a few things. One, it allows me to reflect and come to God humbly and ask him to move on my behalf. And two, it allows me to document my prayers, which ultimately help me remember the very things that I was praying for and see the hand of God tangibly in my life when he answers them. So I would urge you, consider writing down your prayers. It could be in a blank notebook. It could even be on your phone. Or you could check out the one I personally designed and used for my own quiet time and spiritual discipline that I think will be a huge blessing. It's the exact structure and system that I've used for years to pray and be more consistent in my spiritual disciplines. You can pick yours up today by clicking the link in the pinned comment below. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.